Guadalajara, Mexico. The 7th of February, 1985. Just after 2 in the afternoon, a man walks out of the United States consulate, heading to meet his wife for lunch. He is an agent of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, and he has spent more than 4 years in Mexico working undercover, building cases against the most powerful traffickers in the country. He is good at his job. By some accounts, he is close to exposing a multi-billion-dollar pipeline of drugs and corruption. He never makes it to lunch. As he approaches his vehicle, several men surround him, force him into a car, and drive away. It happens in seconds, in broad daylight, a short distance from American diplomatic soil. And just like that, Enrique Camarena, known to everyone as Kiki, is gone. He would be held for roughly 2 days, interrogated by men who wanted to know exactly what the United States knew. And then he would be killed. His body would not be found for nearly a month, dumped in a rural area far from the city. Kiki Camarena was the first agent of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration to be killed on Mexican soil. And his murder would become a turning point in the entire history of the war on drugs. The moment the United States decided that the killing of one of its agents could never go unanswered, no matter how long it took. It would take 40 years. This is the story of the man who ordered that killing. The man the underworld called the Narco of Narcos. A founding father of the modern Mexican drug trade, one of the most powerful traffickers of his era, and for 4 decades, the man who got away with the murder of a DEA agent. Rafael Caro Quintero. To understand who he was, you have to understand the world he helped build. Because Caro Quintero was not just any trafficker. He was present at the creation. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the entire Mexican drug trade was consolidating into a single organization based in the city of Guadalajara. It was run by a group of men who would become legends in the underworld, and Caro Quintero was one of them. A founding member of what came to be called the Guadalajara Cartel. This was the original empire, the federation that controlled nearly all of the marijuana and increasingly the Colombian cocaine flowing from Mexico into the United States. It was the organization from which every major cartel in this story would eventually descend: Sinaloa, Tijuana, Juarez, all of them. And Caro Quintero sat near its very top. He was young, brash, enormously wealthy, and spectacularly ambitious. His specialty was marijuana, and he pursued it on a scale no one had attempted before. His crowning achievement was a plantation in the desert of Chihuahua, known as Rancho Buffalo, an industrial-scale marijuana operation so vast that it employed thousands of workers and produced a harvest worth, by some estimates, well over $1 billion. It was less a farm than a factory, a monument to just how big the Mexican drug trade had become, and to how untouchable men like Caro Quintero believed they were. He was, by the accounts of the era, the very image of the new Mexican drug lord, flamboyant, fabulously rich, and convinced of his own invincibility. He owned fleets of cars and sprawling properties. He moved through Guadalajara with the swagger of a man who believed the law could be bought. And in the Mexico of the early 1980s, he was not entirely wrong. The Guadalajara cartel did not simply evade the state. It had penetrated it, cultivating protection inside the security services and the political class that allowed men like Caro Quintero to operate almost in the open. He was a celebrity in the underworld and a phantom to the law, a young man who had helped invent the modern trade and reaped its first great fortunes. That sense of impunity, the deep and settled belief that nothing he did could ever truly touch him, is the key to understanding what he did next. He did not order the murder of an American agent in spite of the risk. He ordered it because he did not believe there was any risk at all. And then the Mexican government, acting on intelligence, raided Rancho Búfalo and destroyed it. Caro Quintero was enraged, and he became convinced that the man responsible for leading the authorities to his plantation was a certain undercover American agent who had been digging into his operations. Kiki Camarena. What followed was the act that would define Caro Quintero's life and ultimately destroy the world he had helped build. In February of 1985, his men abducted Camarena off the street in Guadalajara. The agent was held, interrogated for what he knew about American investigations, and killed. It was an act of stunning arrogance, the murder of a federal agent of the United States, carried out by a cartel that believed itself beyond consequence. It was the gravest miscalculation in the history of the Mexican drug trade. Because the United States did not let it go, the response was unlike anything Mexican traffickers had ever experienced. The DEA launched one of the largest homicide investigations in its history, a sprawling effort to hunt down everyone responsible for Camarena's death. The pressure on the Mexican government was relentless and unending. And one by one, the leaders of the Guadalajara cartel were tracked down and arrested, including Caro Quintero himself, captured in Costa Rica and returned to Mexico before the year was out. The investigation that followed became a defining mission for the agency. American investigators poured into Mexico, and what they uncovered went far beyond a single cartel. The murder had exposed the rot at the heart of the Mexican state, the web of corrupt officials, police commanders, and members of the security services who had taken the cartel's money and looked the other way, and who, in some accounts, had been complicit in the events surrounding Camarena's death. The case strained relations between the two countries to a degree few criminal matters ever had. It forced a reckoning with just how deeply organized crime had compromised the institutions meant to fight it. And it hardened, within the DEA, a culture of relentless, generational pursuit, the conviction that an attack on one of its own demanded an answer that would not fade with time. The killing of Kiki Camarena did not just put Caro Quintero in prison, it shattered the entire organization he belonged to. Under the weight of the American pressure that the murder had unleashed, the Guadalajara cartel came apart. And it was in the aftermath of that collapse, with its leaders falling, that the head of the organization, the man known as the Godfather, is said to have divided the territories of Mexico among his lieutenants, carving the single empire into the separate cartels that would go to war with one another for the next 40 years. In a very real sense, the modern map of the Mexican drug trade was drawn in the wreckage of the crime Caro Quintero had committed. He had not just killed an agent, he had detonated the world he lived in. Every cartel that came after every name that would one day terrorize Mexico. El Chapo's Sinaloa, the Arellano Felix family in Tijuana, the Carrillo Fuentes in Juarez, emerged from that division, from the breakup that Caro Quintero's crime had helped to set in motion. The founding generation fell, and the children fought over the pieces for the next 40 years. In that sense, the murder of a single DEA agent did more to shape the modern map of organized crime in Mexico than almost any other act in its history. It ended one era and, in the wreckage, began another, the era of warring cartels that has not ended to this day. For the DEA, Camarena became something close to sacred, a fallen hero whose name was enshrined on the agency's wall of honor, a symbol of the cost of the work and of the agency's refusal to forget. And the agency made a quiet promise it would keep for decades, that no matter how long it took, the man who ordered Kiki's death would answer for it in an American courtroom. It is worth pausing on the man at the center of it. Kiki Camarena was an American, born in Mexico. A former Marine who had joined the DEA and volunteered for some of its most dangerous work. He left behind a wife and 3 young sons. In the United States, his death gave rise to a national movement, the red ribbon worn each year in American schools as a symbol of the pledge to live drug-free traces its origins directly to the public grief over his murder. He was not an abstraction, not a symbol on a wall. He was a husband and a father, killed at 37 for being good at his job. And it was the memory of that man, more than any legal strategy, that kept the case alive across 40 years. But that day of reckoning would be a long time coming, because Caro Quintero, even behind bars, was far from finished. He went to prison in Mexico in 1985, but prison did not stop him. From inside his cell, according to U.S. prosecutors, he continued to run his drug trafficking organization for decades, using family members and trusted associates on the outside to move marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin into the United States. The narco of narcos remained a narco, directing an empire from a prison cell year after year, while the agent he had killed lay enshrined on a wall 1,000 miles away. It was a measure of the man and of the system around him that imprisonment barely interrupted his business. He held court inside the prison. He gave orders that traveled out through visitors and intermediaries. The marijuana, the cocaine, the methamphetamine kept flowing north under his direction. For nearly 3 decades, the United States knew exactly where the man who had murdered its agent was sitting and could do little but watch him run his organization from the other side of the bars. In a country whose courts and prisons answered to a different authority. It was a slow, grinding humiliation, and it sharpened the agency's resolve with every passing year. And then, in 2013, came the moment that enraged the United States all over again. A Mexican court ordered Caro Quintero released. The ruling was based on a technicality, a finding that he had been tried in the wrong court system decades earlier. After 28 years behind bars, the man who had ordered the murder of a DEA agent simply walked free. The United States was furious. Officials condemned the release. The DEA, which had spent decades honoring Camarena's memory, watched the man responsible for his death step out of prison and vanish. The release was more than a legal embarrassment. To the United States, it was a betrayal, a sign that even after everything, the man who had killed Kiki Camarena could be set loose by the stroke of a judge's pen. American officials condemned it in the strongest terms and demanded his rearrest. The bounty on him climbed. Diplomats protested. And a case that had seemed to be a closed chapter of history was suddenly open again, with its central figure free and back in business. For the agents who had spent their careers honoring Camarena's memory, it was a wound-torn open proof that the promise made over his body had not yet been kept. Because vanish is exactly what he did. Caro Quintero disappeared into the mountains of Sinaloa, the rugged heartland of the Mexican drug trade, and went back to what he knew. According to American authorities, he resumed running his trafficking organization from hiding, even as he became, once again, one of the most wanted fugitives in the world. The United States placed an enormous bounty on him. He became, for the second time in his life, a ghost, the one who got away. The founding narco who had killed an American agent and beaten the system twice. The years in hiding were not quiet ones. Even as a fugitive in his 60s, Caro Quintero was accused of reasserting himself in the trade of clashing with rival factions in the territories he moved through, of remaining a figure of real power in the Sinaloa Mountains rather than a relic in retirement. He was not a forgotten old man waiting to be found. He was an active player, and his presence stirred conflict wherever he went. That is part of what made his eventual recapture so significant. It would remove not just the symbol of an old crime, but a living force in the present-day underworld. For nearly a decade, he stayed gone. And then, in July of 2022, Mexican forces finally tracked him down and recaptured him. It was a major operation, and it came at a cost. A Mexican Navy helicopter involved in the broader effort crashed, killing the Marines aboard. After 37 years, the man behind the Camarena murder was back in custody. But he was in a Mexican prison, and the question that had haunted the DEA for decades remained unanswered. Would he ever face American justice? The answer came in February of 2025. Under intense pressure from the United States, the Mexican government expelled a group of 29 high-level cartel figures and transferred them into American custody. And among them was Rafael "Caro" Quintero. He was flown to New York, and on the 28th of February 2025, he was arraigned in a federal courtroom in Brooklyn. More than 100 DEA agents packed the room to watch it happen. For an agency that had waited 40 years, it was a moment of profound significance the day, as one official put it, that justice would finally be served. The charges against him are severe. He was arraigned on an indictment that includes leading a continuing criminal enterprise, a count that encompasses a long list of violations, including a murder conspiracy, along with international narcotics distribution conspiracies and a firearms charge. The lead count carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison. And prosecutors confirmed something more, that the death penalty remains a possibility, a decision still working its way through the process. To handle the gravity of that prospect, the court appointed a lawyer experienced in federal capital cases to assist in his defense. He pleaded not guilty. He is held in one of the most restrictive units of the federal prison system, reserved for the highest risk inmates, those the government fears could pass instructions to the outside world, even from behind bars. He was expelled to the United States alongside another legend of the trade, Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, the longtime head of the Juarez cartel, the brother of the trafficker known as the Lord of the Skies. The two old men, founding figures of two of the cartels that had shaped Mexico, now sat in the same American courthouse, facing the end of their long runs. The pairing was striking. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes had inherited and run the Juarez cartel for years after the death of his brother, the legendary Lord of the Skies. He too had been a titan of the trade, a man whose organization fought a war with Sinaloa that turned a border city into one of the deadliest places on earth. Now he and Caro Quintero, two founding-era bosses who had once seemed beyond the reach of American law, sat in the same Brooklyn courthouse, arraigned on the same day, their long reigns ending in the same fluorescent-lit room. It was, in its way, the closing of an entire chapter of the Mexican drug trade. As of this telling, Caro Quintero's trial is expected to take place in 2027, more than 4 decades after the crime that made him infamous. The circumstances of his expulsion were themselves a sign of how much the world had changed. Caro Quintero was not handed over through the slow machinery of a normal extradition request. He was expelled, along with 28 other high-level operatives, in a dramatic mass transfer that came as the Mexican government faced intense pressure from a new American administration threatening sweeping economic measures against the country. In effect, a generation of cartel leaders was delivered northward as part of a broader confrontation between the two governments. It was the second such mass transfer in a single year. The founding narco, who had once believed the border protected him, discovered, in the end, that the border had become the very thing delivering him to his reckoning. And the trial to come carries a weight far beyond one man. Caro Quintero is among the last living members of the founding generation of the modern Mexican drug trade, the men who were there at the very beginning, in Guadalajara, before the map was divided and the wars began. What he knows, after 4 decades inside the trade and inside the prisons of 2 countries, could fill volumes. The corruption that protected him, the men who carved up Mexico in 1989, the secrets of an era that shaped everything that followed. Whether any of it ever reaches a courtroom or whether it dies with him is one of the great open questions of the case. He is not only a defendant, he is one of the last witnesses to how all of this began. When Caro Quintero was finally arraigned in Brooklyn, the symbolism was impossible to miss. More than 100 agents filled the courtroom, a silent wall of witnesses to a moment 40 years in the making. After the hearing, in a gesture rich with meaning, a DEA agent was permitted to help escort him from the room. "Justice never forgets," a prosecutor said in court. For an agency that had carried the memory of Kiki Camarena across 4 decades, 3 Mexican prison terms, 1 infuriating release, and one of the longest manhunts in its history, those 3 words were the entire point. The man who had killed one of their own was, at last, in their hands. It had taken longer than anyone could have imagined, but the promise made over Camarena's body had finally been kept. And so we are left, as we so often are with these stories, with a set of questions that have not yet been answered. Will the United States ultimately seek the death penalty against a 70-something-year-old man for a murder committed 40 years ago? And what would it mean, after all this time, to finally close the case of Kiki Camarena? What secrets does Caro Quintero carry about the founding generation of the Mexican drug trade? About the corruption that protected him? About the men who divided the country in 1989? And will any of it ever come out in an American courtroom? And the question that hangs over the entire story: how was it possible for so long for the man who killed a DEA agent to live in the open, run an empire from a prison cell, walk free on a technicality, and vanish into the mountains, if not for a system on both sides of the border that allowed it? Some of those answers may emerge when his trial finally begins. Others, as so often happens in the history of organized crime in Mexico, may never come at all. What is certain is this: Rafael Caro Quintero believed in 1985 that he was untouchable. He believed that a man of his wealth and his power could order the murder of an American agent and suffer nothing for it. And for a very long time, he was almost right. He served his sentence in a country whose system he kept running from his cell. He walked free on a legal technicality. He disappeared into the mountains and went back to work. Twice, he beat the people hunting him. But the DEA had made a promise over the body of Kiki Camarena, and it kept that promise across 4 decades. 3 Mexican prison terms, 2 recaptures, and one of the longest manhunts in its history. The narco of narcos, the man who helped build the modern Mexican drug trade, and then, with a single act of arrogance, helped destroy the world it grew from, finally sits in an American cell, waiting for a trial 40 years in the making. In the Mexican drug trade, men like Caro Quintero have always believed that time is on their side, that if they wait long enough, the hunt will lose interest, the witnesses will die, the world will move on. Sometimes they are right. But sometimes justice simply waits longer than they do. If this story showed you the hidden complexity behind the headlines, subscribe to Sleeping Crimes. Every week, we unravel the stories we need to understand, not to glorify crime, but to understand its real impact. Turn on notifications. We'll see you at the next